Yorubas does not hate Fulanese the way they hate Igbos. Because the Igbos are the ones who always tell them the truth of their weaknesses. And
I'm not against agitation for self-determination or self-independence. The Scotland where I live in, they are still agitating. They had a referendum a few years back, and they are still is one of the primary items in the manifesto of Scottish National Party, SNP.
Yeah. In 1962, an Igbo man became the first vice-chancellor of the University of Lagos, built from nothing in the heart of Yoruba land. At the very same time, another Igbo man, Professor Kenneth Dike, was running the University of Ibadan, also in Yoruba land. Two universities, both in Western Nigeria, both led by Igbo professors. By 1965, that wasn't seen as excellence anymore. It was seen as a threat by the Yoruba nation. A crisis broke out over Professor Njoku's reappointment. His own colleague at the time didn't mince words. This man had done first-class work and he was being dropped for just one reason only: tribal politics. He resigned and walked straight into a job most people would call the win, a visiting professorship in America. This is the story of the man who built Nigerian education twice and refused to let one country's tribalism be the end of his contributions in the
The only solution, the only guarantee for our future, the future of my children, the future of their children, the future of generation unborn is Biafra. If you are not in support of Biafra, you are the traitor. You are a traitor. You are a traitor. And the people, the generation that are coming, they will tell you if you are right. They will.
Yes, the truth still remains that based on what is happening in Nigeria today, that you see Biafra agitation on the increase. Agitation for Biafra is not just ordinarily. Something is triggering it. Something. Okay, now, this guy is saying this thing and it made a lot of sense. Hatred. Why are you people hating this tribe called Igbo? Why this gang up? To start with, it is survival that made the Igbos to declare Biafra. And that same fight against the Southeast is still happening today. And the agitation is yet to be actualized. And the way it is now, it has become an anthem. Yes. Because what is triggering this fight for Biafra is still triggering the fight for Biafra. Take, for instance, it's all clear that the Yorubas are always fighting the Igbos. Now you leave the Fulanis that took over your land, Kwara State, decades ago. You leave them all. Even in the modern time, your land is being taken over, your chiefs are being chased away. You leave them all. Now, Igbo man welcome your land, come they buy land with his own sweat money. After you say, hey, you want to take over the land through back door from him. Well, that's a food for thought. Let's hear this young man in his own view, what he's saying about that. We are coming back.
Okay, this is the real reason why some Yorubas hate Igbo so much. And you know the reason they hate Igbo so much? It is not because Igbos did anything historically to the Yorubas. No. Meanwhile, it was Fulanese that took Ilorin from Yorubas. Yorubas does not hate Fulanese the way they hate Igbos. Because the Igbos are the ones who always tell them the truth of their weaknesses. And that weaknesses is that Yorubas want to actually eat their cake and still have it. Not all of them though. Some of them, and especially most of them who are not educated enough, They want to eat their cake and still have it. They will sell their land to the Igbos, and Igbos are buying these lands that they are selling to them in the name that we are one Nigeria, they are one country. So everywhere is home, right? One country, everywhere is home. Then they will come back and go back to say, no, this land they have sold to them, they are taking it over now. Does it make sense to you? These are the people who hold one Nigeria together. They want Nigeria to be one indivisible country. Yet they do not want Igbos to live in their land, but they want one Nigeria. Now, Igbos say that no, there is nothing one about Nigeria. Since when we buy land in Yoruba land, and we occupy land, develop this land, eventually they will say, no, we are taking over their land. Now let us go our separate ways so that we will stop buying land. We will buy land in the name that we are buying land in a foreign country, not buying land in our country. Yorubas say no, because Fulani oligarch favors them. Fulani gives them 8 years. As per, they represent the southern part of Nigeria. Fulani take 8 years. The north, which is the Hausas in the north, the majority, they are the pawn. Just like the majority in the south are the pawn, the south and the southeast, as per geographical division done by the Britain. So the Yorubas are the minority in the south, because if you bring south together, eastern region consists of south. So, but south was actually removed from the east, so that there will be division that will weaken the Igbo people. You will find the people bearing Igbo name, yet they are not Igbo. You will find people speaking Igbo. They told them, no, they are not Igbo. So this is the confusion that we have seen. Now tell me, be the judge. If we say that we want to go our separate ways, having seen that Fulanis have taken monopoly over business, Fulanis have taken monopoly over politics, they don't have the number. They are 15 million 2 years ago, but now they are 20 million because their number keep on ramping up every day, because since Buhari took over power, Fulani population increased drastically. How it increased is history. So, because we admonish the behaviors of Yorubas, they always want to stand in the middle. Not all of them. There are good Yorubas. There are a lot of friends of mine who are Yorubas, and I believe they understand this, because that is what has kept Nigeria under this bondage that we are living in today. So if you know it is not one Nigeria, why do you insist that it is one Nigeria? Because you are now fighting that Igbos are taking over your land. These lands, they bought it. They paid for it. They develop it. After they develop it, you want to now champion it to be your land. You sold it to them. You want to now claim they are taking over your land. Are you insane? Dude, you guys are so entitled. You guys are so entitled and emboldened to the point that you don't realize that you cannot sell your land and still have it. You sold it to them under rhetoric of one Nigeria, and they bought it because they believe that Nigeria is one. And you go behind down and telling the government that Igbos are taking your land. You cry one Nigeria, but you don't want Igbos to vote in Lagos. Then, when Igbos talk about your inconsistencies and your, snake behavior, then you will detest Igbos, you will hate them, you will go about telling people that Igbos are the ones committing crime all over the world, just like you are doing in South Africa. They are selling powder all over South Africa, even when the opposite is the case, because you are selling powder in South Africa, you are committing fraud in South Africa, you are doing everything that is being talked about in South Africa. No one talks about it because Igbos don't have time that you have to come out there and validating the, the accusation by people. Hence, you are doing that unabated. But I have time now. Anywhere I hear a Yoruba person now accusing Igbos of committing crime all over the world and now exonerating themselves. This is exactly what Yorubas did. They lost their Lauren to Fulani because Afonja thought that I can make peace with my enemy. I can make peace with people who love me so that I can use them to defeat those who I feel like I don't like. That's what y'all did in history. You lost the Lauren and you still carrying out this behavior. That is very bad. If you do not like Igbos, you guys are always the ones who stand in the middle because you guys are South. We are all South. In the northern Nigeria, the Hausa Fulanis, they give 8 years to South, give 8 years to North. And you guys are always the ones receiving that 8 years. That's why you champion one Nigeria. You do not have resources that sustain Nigeria. You only have seaport in Lagos. They made Lagos to be like the business hub. Even though you are not contributing, you don't have natural gas. I don't think there is any mineral that has been discovered in the western Nigeria. Yet, you guys still cry foul all the time. Igbos are taking over your land. What exactly is that thing they're taking? Did they not buy those land from you? If they haven't bought these lands from you, come out and tell us they occupy your land and they didn't buy it. Then when you cry, your government of Lagos will start demolishing Igbo people's property. Yet you cry one Nigeria. As long as people like this element of people are still existing in Nigeria, there will be nothing like one Nigeria. There is nothing like one Nigeria. We are deceiving ourselves, and all of you will continue to bear the consequences. Fulani are actually making their way to Oyo. From there, they will continue to make their way to Yoruba land. You don't have that. You don't cry about that. It is Igbos that are coming and buying properties and developing it in Yoruba land because they believe it is one Nigeria. You guys still think that you can be sneaky and then be successful. It is impossible. You choose to be sneaky or you choose to be successful. That's how it is. You got the same thing applicable with Edo people. Edo people cannot take responsibility. All they do is scapegoating the Igbos. Because they believe that they are intimidated by the Igbos. All the crime they are saying to the world that the Igbos are committing, they are part of the people committing it. When they are caught, they say they are Igbos. The same applicable to some of the Yorubas. When they are caught, they claim they are Igbos. I think it is time Igbo people wake up to admonish and reciprocate the same thing these bigots are doing. We don't need to pretend anymore.
So tell me, in this kind of situation, how the agitation for Biafra will end. And mind you, the push is going far and wide. It's not like before. With what is happening in Nigeria today, the Biafran side, they are pushing it as far as possible, so that they will end this thing once and for all. We all hear the news, what is happening around the world, even with the US side, Congress, and other places where the push is coming from. Like I said, something brings about something. It does not just happen like that. And I keep saying this thing that if things are working out well, if things are normal on a balanced scale, Igbo man no get time to complain. So, but when you spit on somebody's face, well, the person will not allow you to go like that. Even if it takes him how many number of years to get to his destination. And especially, Igbos know they know they live things like that. They are not going to hurt you, but when it comes to things of their own, they're not going to live on like that. They will see the made in China inside that struggle. Well, I know that the struggle has gone far.
A struggle for the restoration of the sovereign state of Biafra is a lifetime struggle that will end up releasing Mazi Nnamdi Kanu.
I'm not against agitation for self-determination or self-independence. The Scotland where I live in, they are still agitating. They had a referendum a few years back, and they're still is one of the primary items in the manifesto of Scottish National Party (SNP). Yeah. So it's legal everywhere, for as long as you are doing it the right way, the legal way.
Nigeria is a lawless society, and sometimes it surprises me that when it comes to IPOB, suddenly Nigeria becomes a lawful society.
You cannot base any agitation on illegality. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has been in prison. Somebody can get up that in that prison and say, because I don't like your face, and kill you. I won't support that. Yeah, what I won't support is illegality.
How can Nigeria, that convicted Mazi Nnamdi Kanu for belonging to a terrorist organization, so-called, fail to convict Mazi Nnamdi for belonging to the same organization?
I'm not taking any position. The questions I'm asking today are the questions. If you go to our comment section, these are the questions that have been raised there. When it involves my followers, I will take it personal. So early 1967, I think it was in January, there was the Aburi Accord.
The problem Nigeria has is problem of leadership and the people there, both southeast, south-south, southwest, northeast, north central, or whatever. It's the people there who are running the affairs of the things. If we have a strong governance, strong leadership in the southeast, in the southeastern states, I think the federal government will be the one to come to be negotiating with us. You don't go about chasing butterfly. If you make your garden beautiful, butterflies will come to your garden. We don't have any negotiating power, any negotiating capacity. We don't have that strategy. We have not built that capacity to go and negotiate for distance. But we want it to be given to us. IPOB has no manifesto on ground.
It doesn't need to have a manifesto. IPOB has a code of conduct, and its aim is simple: to actualize a sovereign state of Biafra through self-determination. It is not a political party that you will expect it to give you a manifesto. No movement that is dedicated to the actualization of self-determination for its people has a manifesto. In Imo State, for instance, the people did not choose the governor. The governor was imposed on them.
Kopuzodimma goes to Abuja to wave Tinubu when he's going for his medical treatment in France.
Nigeria controls the southeast, so it doesn't allow the will of the people to happen. People do not know that what actually led to Biafra breaking out was the crisis between Akintola and Awolowo.
This current president was the governor of Lagos State. His allocation was withheld. He never went to Abuja.
You know very well that in Lagos, they could almost hold you the way they will hold you on the street to take money off your pocket.
Yes. They have not even had any encounter with the federal government to make them to go and bow to them. They willingly on their own submitted to go and bow every month.
Yes, that is the update from that side. And I must tell you that this is our friend from Niger Delta. Hey, the guy go vibrate, go like this. Tomorrow he go vibrate, go the next day, the other way. You will not know where this man stand. Eh? His own dancing, eh? Skelewu. Okay, let's hear him.
The only solution, the only guarantee for our future, the future of my children, the future of their children, the future of generation unborn is Biafra. If you are not in support of Biafra, you are the traitor. You are a traitor. You are a traitor. And the people, the generation that are coming, they will tell you if you are alive. They will.
All right, Niger Delta people, make una come carry una brother. Okay, should be that they say na king. Because that time they fight with Benin people, you know, Ijo Benin, stuff like that. Well, you've heard what he said, and I cannot, you know, talk more than that. But tomorrow, another one will still come out. He has said several things, so many things that are quite different, coming from one person.
In 1962, an Igbo man became the first vice-chancellor of the University of Lagos, built from nothing in the heart of Yoruba land. At the very same time, another Igbo man, Professor Kenneth Dike, was running the University of Ibadan, also in Yoruba land. 2 universities, both in Western Nigeria, both led by Igbo professors. By 1965, that wasn't seen as excellence anymore. It was seen as a threat by the Yoruba nation. A crisis broke out over Professor Njoku's reappointment. His own colleague at the time didn't mince words. This man had done first-class work and he was being dropped for just one reason only: tribal politics. He resigned and walked straight into a job most people would call the win, a visiting professorship in America. This is the story of the man who built Nigerian education twice and refused to let one country's tribalism be the end of his contributions in the academic world. Professor Eni Njoku was born on the 6th of November 1917 in Ebem, Ohafia. He started at Ebem Primary School, then moved on to Hope Waddell Training Institute in Calabar, and later Yaba Higher College in Lagos. The same missionary-rooted education pipeline that shaped a generation of Nigeria's earliest scholars. Then he crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Not too many people from Nigeria would in search of education. He went to study botany at the University of Manchester, and in 1947, he didn't just pass, he graduated with first-class honors. A master's degree followed in 1948. In 1954, the University of London conferred him a Doctor of Philosophy. He wasn't collecting degrees. He was quietly proving what an Igbo man from Nigeria could do on the world stage. When Dr. Njoku came home in 1948, he joined University College, Ibadan, and he was one of the only 2 Nigerians on the entire academic staff when the college opened its doors. Few in a room full of foreign lecturers. An Igbo son from Ohafia was one of the founding pillars of Nigeria's first university college. Professor Njoku researched how sunlight shapes the growth of tropical plants. Publishing in international botanical journals, he rose from lecturer to senior lecturer to full professor, then head of the Department of Botany, then Dean of the Faculty of Sciences. Along the way, he stepped into national politics, a member of the Nigeria's House of Representatives, serving as Minister of Mines and Power, and later Chairman of the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria. By every measure, he had already spent a career becoming the first. The bigger first hadn't come yet. Then, in 1962, a brand new university was rising out of the grounds of Lagos, and it needed someone to lead it into prominence. Nigeria once again chose Professor Eni Njoku. He became the first ever Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos. The renowned scholar Sir Eric Ashby called him one of the most eminent of Nigerians, praising what he described as his enlightened leadership at UNILAG. But in 1965, a major dispute erupted over his reappointment as Vice Chancellor because of his ethnic origins. Njoku resigned. And here is where most stories like this one end. A respected scholar pushed out, taking the graceful exit. But no, he accepted a visiting professorship at Michigan State University in the United States. A soft landing, an ocean away from the controversy in Nigeria and her ethnic politics. He didn't stay in America for too long. In 1966, Njoku accepted the appointment as Vice Chancellor of University of Nigeria, Nsukka. UNN had been founded by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe in 1955 as the first indigenous American-style university in the whole of West Africa, modeled on Michigan State University's curriculum, and its first two vice-chancellors, George Marion Johnson and Glenn L. Taggart, were both American academics tied to that founding partnership. Njoku became the first Nigerian ever to hold the post. So, by 1966, the man had done something no one else in the country could claim. Built a Nigerian university from its very foundation and being trusted to become the first Nigerian to lead a second one. He couldn't have known it yet, but he had just walked back into the exact region about to become the center of a genocidal war. In 1967, war broke out, and the University of Nigeria sat inside the newly declared Biafra. It was renamed the University of Biafra. Njoku had a passport, international standing, a reputation across the world, and a standing invitation to a comfortable life in America. But no, once again, he stayed in Biafra land. He served as an advisor and administrator inside Biafra throughout the war, and carried the predicament of his people all around the world, leading Biafran delegations to ad hoc constitutional conferences in Lagos in 1966, and to the OAU-sponsored peace talks in Niamey and Addis Ababa in 1968. He wasn't a soldier. He was something more. He was something the war needed just as badly. A voice, pressing again and again for a peaceful end to the bloodshed. His quest for a new nation of Biafra was not actualized. So, when the war ended in 1970, Professor Njoku went back to the only thing he had ever really wanted: the classroom, the research, the students of Nsukka.
A number of buildings were damaged, and all the buildings that were left, all the other buildings that were left that are standing, don't have any furniture or equipment, and many of them have lost all their fixtures. So before the students come in, we want to construct some emergency classroom and laboratory furniture. We want to repair some of the damage to the buildings, and also we want to try and see how much equipment and books we can find from different sources. So we are trying to do all these things. Some student volunteers are already on both campuses helping with the cleaning up. We have conducted preliminary registration of students. Nearly 2,000 students have now registered, and these are all students who were with us by the time the war broke out. We want to start with them and to add other students in October. And already over 200 members of our academic and other senior staff have also registered. And we've received at least one inquiry from an expatriate member of staff who is anxious to get back to join us as soon as we ask him to do so. We reckon that we would need at least £5 million to get the campus back to what it was before the war broke out. In fact, it's likely to cost more than that, but we reckon that we require at least £5 million. We believe that many of our problems would have been solved, but we need to get back the goodwill which we had from other parts of the country, and also we hope that the overseas bodies which gave us a lot of support will continue to.
He kept teaching until his death in London on the 22nd day of December 1974. At 57 years old, he passed. But such men are never judged by the number of years they lived on earth. He left behind honorary doctorates from the University of Nigeria and Michigan State University, United States of America. Research still cited by botanists today, and a family that carried his brilliance forward, including his son, Eni Njoku, who went on to work with NASA on Earth-observing satellite science. Today, when a student in Unilag or University of Nigeria, Nsukka, walk on the ground of these two universities, they are only staring at structures and legacies built by a farmer's son from Ohafia in Igbo land. Professor Njoku didn't take the safe exit. He built one Nigerian university from nothing. then became the first Nigerian trusted to lead a second one, even when that trust meant walking straight back home into a war or into a bullet. He didn't care because of his love for his people. Igbo excellence has never been a slogan. It has a name, a birthplace, and a story. And one of the finest chapters belongs to a man who, when he had every reason to stay away, chose to go back home and live or die with his own people. If you enjoyed watching this beautiful documentary about the sacrifices, life, and extraordinary achievements of Professor Eni Njoku, kindly hit the subscribe button. My name, once again, is Prince Onwadenem Ngozi Chukwuka Fortune.
Yes, viewers, I thank you for coming along with me. Please, if you have not subscribed to YangaLife channel, please click on the subscription button, notification bell, like our videos, and don't forget to share them. Till I come your way next time. Bye.